Hello, Professor. Hello, everyone. Today, I am so pleased to be here for being the first presenter. We are going to negotiate Chapter 30 is Money Growth and Inflation, which is prepared by Professor Royal Yun and Bong Min. We are in Team 1 and presented by Seav Fong as myself, Mouy Ing Lee Moni Sawan, Kim Mengsrun, and Sodyna. The first thing happens to be that on introductions, our prices couldn't stay permanently. For instance, in the United States during the 19th century, they fell into a phenomenon called deflation. It was a major issue in economy. Farmers who had accumulated large debts suffer when declining crop prices reduce their incomes and thus their ability to pay off their debts. Then they advocated government policy to reverse the deflations. Therefore, other countries such as the US, Japan, and many more try to avoid deflations. Significantly, Venezuela in 2018 reached 1.4 million person per year that can lead to an over high rate of inflation called hyperinflation. Is inflation causing problem to the economy? Why? And very soon we will find out together. And move on to the next slide. We are going to talk about the level of price and the value of money. Nowadays, in Cambodia, people enjoy more food. Hence, the sellers started to produce more and develop the ingredients to get more favors. As a result, even though food prices rise, people still buy them and enjoy them every day. Furthermore, fuel, gasoline, and vehicles become indispensable in daily life, although the price keeps rising. In essence, inflation gives rise to the increasing the low price level and bring down the value of money. To clarify the formula, we denoted X equal to the price of food cost $1 and 1 over X equal to the value of $1. If X up to $2, then the value of $1 equal to 1 over 2 food. But if X up to $3, then the value of $1 equal to 1 over 3 food. And move on to the next slide, we will discuss the quantity theory of money. This theory is used to determine the price level and that the growth rate in the value of money available determine the inflation rate. But what determines the value of money? The answer is money supply and money demands. When people take money to save in the bank, spend on daily necessities, we call it money of demand. But we don't know how the banks calculate or make interest rates to get incomes, and this economics call it supply of money. Move on to the next point, we explore the effect of monetary injections. Can you imagine that if suddenly the Fed prints double money and throw it out for everyone? Incredible. The Fed could inject money into the economy by buying some government bonds from the public in open market operations. Look at the graph and see what happens after such a monetary injection and compare equilibrium with the old one. When the Fed increased the supply of money, the money supply curve shifts from MS1 to MS2. The value of money on the left axis and the price level on the right axis adjust to bring supplies and demand back into balance. The equilibrium moves from point A to point B. Thus, an increase in the money supply makes dollar more plentiful. The price level increases make each dollar less valuable. A study around 2017 to 2018, inflation in Venezuela has surpassed 700%. That was the worst currency crisis. According to the interview with their citizens, they said they need 300 bolivias just to buy a piece of chewing gums compared to the previous just around 90 bolivias. Besides, 20,000 bolivias, which is the largest amount that a person could take out of the bank in cost just to buy a kilo of cheese.
A brief look at the adjustment process. Having identified the new and old equilibrium, we can now take a look at how an economy moves from these two equilibrium. When the government prints more money, there will be an excess of money supply because demand hasn't adjusted fully. However, when people start to receive more money, they will start spending and purchasing more goods and services. Other people on the receiving end will realize the rise in demand for their goods and adjust price levels accordingly. At the end, people in the economy will realize there is an excess money supply and therefore demand more money in order to maintain their living standards. In conjunction with the increased demand, the value of money therefore slowly decreases over time, and in the long run, the whole economy will have adjusted to the new equilibrium point. Imagine four people, Bob, Bill, Buck, and Bit, representing economy A. Bob and Bill representing consumers, Buck as the producer, and Bit as the government. In this economy, the only production of goods is apples. So every day Bob and Bill buys apples from Buck, representing the GDP of economy A. Suddenly, for some reason, Bit got a weird idea one night and started printing more dollar bills for the economy. And the next morning, Bob and Bill realized that they have more dollars to spend in the economy and brought more than usual apples from Buck. Buck was taken aback by the increase in demand, and he started raising prices to take advantage of it. Over time though, everyone in the economy realized that the value of apples has not increased, but actually the money supply. Thus, over the year, with the value of dollars dropping down, demand for it increases to take into account its excess. So we can say that economy A adjusted a new equilibrium point so that the quantity of money supply equals the quantity of money demanded. In this case, the money supply is what Bit printed and the quantity demanded is the price of apples from Buck. Because buying goods means exchange of money, price can represent the quantity of money demanded in economy A. The classical dichotomy and monetary neutrality. Alright, what does this mean? Well, classical is a word in economics used to refer to old economic thinking, and dichotomy means a division between two groups. Therefore, classical dichotomy means the division of two groups based on old economic thinking. Well, what are the two groups then? David Hume was an economist in the 18th century trying to figure out what are the effects of monetary changes to other variables such as production, employment, real wages, and real interest rates. He came up with two groups, nominal variables and real variables. Remember that nominal means not adjusted for inflation, and real means adjusted for inflation. Thus, nominal variables are any economic variables that have not been adjusted for inflation or are measured in monetary units, because money is subjected to inflation. On the other hand, real variables are any economic variables that have been adjusted for inflation or are measured in physical units, because physical quantities are not affected by inflation. Why separate the two variables? Well, David Hume discovered that some monetary changes only affect nominal and not real variables. Real variables are affected through demand and supply for the variables, whereas nominal variables are affected by changes in the money supply. He dubbed this effect monetary neutrality, the proposition that changes in the money supply do not affect real variables. Example: when a country prints more money, nominal variables like wages, price of goods, or nominal GDP rises, but real variables, meaning actual increase in wealth, like production, real interest rates, or real GDP doesn't change. To summarize, we can say, 1. Monetary neutrality will lead to confusion in the short run. This means their perception on the value of money is not yet updated. But over time, people will adjust and quickly identify the correct value of any goods, taking into account both nominal and real variables. This adjustment can be seen on the graph of market for money supply. Velocity and quantity equation. Now, time for some math. Yay! Having learned about adjustments to changes in the money supply and monetary neutrality, another concept must be understood to fully get the clear picture on what the quantity theory of money supply is trying to explain. And this concept is called the velocity of money, the rate at which money changes hand. We can say that the total nominal GDP can equal the amount of money supply being shuffled X times. Because GDP measures the exchange of final goods and services for money, we can think of it that way. But nominal GDP also equals current price times real GDP. So, money supply times velocity of money equals price level times real output. Therefore, V times M equals P times Y. Or you can think of it like this. Because GDP deflator's formula is nominal GDP divided by real GDP times 100, nominal GDP will equals to 100 times GDP deflator times real GDP. Therefore, P will equal to 100 GDP deflator. We can say that velocity of money, therefore, can equal to 100 GDP deflator times real output divided by the money supply. What does this all mean then? The equation reflects an increase in the quantity of money in an economy must reflect in one of the other three variables, so V, P, or Y. And according to monetary neutrality, velocity of money doesn't change that much. And instead, P times Y, or real GDP, rises at the same rate as the change in money supply. This is called monetary neutrality. And we can provide the same example for country A. Let's say BIT prints $100 worth of money. Bill and Bob buys 5 apples worth $10 each and every month. And Bill and Bob buys 5 apples worth $10 each every month. Bob takes this profit and buys Bill's and Bob's supply of water of 5 liters for $20 each and every month. So in this case, there is an extra production of good, which is supply of water. And so therefore, we can compute the velocity of money with all the variables given. First off, money supply is M, which is equals to $100, which is what BIT prints. And nominal GDP is just the price level times with the real output. In this case, it's apples and water. So for apples, it's 5 times 10 times 2 for each person. And for water, it's 5 times $20. And if we compute, we get $200 that the whole economy spent in a month. And so we can plug it all into the equation. V equals to nominal GDP over money supply, which is equals to 200 divided by 100, or 2 times per dollar per month. This just means that each dollar in the economy is shuffled from one hand to another 2 times in 1 month.
Now, let's talk about the Fisher effects. Suppose you borrow $100 from your grandpa, and he charges you an interest rate of 5%. Yes, this grandpa charges grandson an interest rate for borrowing. A year later, you will have to pay him the money, and with interest, it will be $105. However, all over the year, the inflation rate is 5%. The increase in the overall price level by 5% means that an item that used to cost $100 will now cost $105. So, what's your grandpa really gain? He might gain a 5% increase in the number of dollars, but his real gain is 0. Or we can say the real interest rate that he received, or the gain in purchasing power of the grandpa, has increased by 0%. The real interest rate can be written as the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. Now, suppose again, this time the grandpa has done his research and he expects the inflation rate to be 5% over the year. And he wants to make sure that his real gain from lending you the money is at least 5%. In order to do that, first he will again lend you $100, but this time he will charge you with the interest rate of 10%. You may think that the grandpa is very mean for charging you a higher interest rate, but this method is done by everyone in the economy, and the increase in nominal interest rate is called the Fisher effect. The Fisher effect states that when the inflation rate rises, so does nominal interest rate. Let's look at the data of the United States from 1950 to 2010. As you can see, during the 1960s, when the inflation rate is stable, the interest rate also remains stable. When the inflation rate rapidly rises during 1975, the interest rate also rises as well. And when the inflation falls, so does the interest rate. Sums up, the Fisher effects describe the relation between nominal interest rate and the expected inflation rate, as these two variables will move together in a parallel pace. Now, let's talk about the inflation tax. Suppose a government of a country. The government has many spending. The government may spend on the salary of the official, spending on the salary of the soldier, spending on transfer payment, and last but not least, spending on infrastructure. In order to get all this money, the government needs to raise revenue. Government can raise revenue in various ways. First, they can tax on goods and services, or they can tax on the income of the people, or by selling the bond in the open market. Government can also print money as a way to raise their revenue. And this is called the inflation tax. It is called tax because, as normal, tax places a burden on the seller or buyer of goods and services. As for the inflation tax, it places a burden on those who hold the money. As the money devalues, people need to hold more money in order to buy the same goods and services as they were in the past. Inflation tax can be a problem, and a great failure of government trying to print money to pay for its spending is Venezuela, a country with the economy that is fueled by the oil industry as its main source of income. When the oil price declined, so does the income of the Venezuela government. When Venezuela government run into budget deficit, they resort to the printing press to pay for all their spending. And as a result, hyperinflation, with an inflation rate of 130,000%. Now, since we already know what can cause the inflation can result in some inconvenience and some cost to the modern economy. First, inflation policy. It is a misbelief when people think that inflation reduces their purchasing power. However, this might not be so true at all. Now, suppose a movie ticket in 2010 costs $2, and now the price of the movie ticket has doubled. One might say that the movie ticket now is more expensive than the movie ticket 10 years ago. But we should also consider that our wage 10 years ago compared to our wage now has also increased and adjusted by the amount of inflation. So, inflation, in actuality, not really reduce our purchasing power at all. This misbelief can also be called money illusion, when people mistakenly compare the nominal price to the real price, as we tend to compare things by the way we remember them, without any calculation and adjustment with the inflation rate.
Hey yo, GG, oh, my bad. By the way, hi, I'm Dina, and I will be continuing with the cost of the inflation. And the first thing I want to talk about is the shoes leather cost. It might sound odd, why shoes leather? They could have picked anything else, and I don't know why too, but get to it in a sec. And shoes leather cost is the waste of resources when people decrease the money that they're holding due to inflation. So what I mean is, people tend to not keep their money by themselves and just store it in the bank or exchange it for other currency, or maybe buy a ton of supplies. And they pick the word shoes leather cost is because back in the day, during the beginning of all the economical stuff, people, businessmen and some stuff, they wear leather shoes as a sense of wealthiness because they have money. So by shoes leather cost is the cost for them to walk around to the bank, because that's where they all keep their money, and it's back and forth, so they can always deposit their money to the bank, so they don't have to hold a lot of money. It's why it's called shoes leather cost. That's what I think, and that's what the book told me, so I'll just go with that. And here, for example, Mr. Lee, and this is a case scenario if we were to face a hyperinflation in Cambodia. So he believed that holding a lot of money is pointless, as money are losing its value day by day due to inflation. He bought a lottery ticket and won about 1 million real, which is equivalent to about $2,500. Instead of holding to the massive check in the picture that he's holding right now, he decided to cash in everything and convert it to USD. The question is, why did he do that? And obviously, the reason is he had to do this because that USD is more of a stable currency rather than the real that's currently facing the inflation, the hyperinflation. And by converting the currency, he needs to allocate his resource, such as time, like the necessity, such as traveling fee or whatsoever, and transaction fee to complete the process. And those process and those fee and those time that was wasted is known as shoes leather cost, as it was used to get rid of a lot of cash in your hand. And now, just by looking at the picture, now Mr. Lee is a happy man enjoying his drug. Next, 30.2c, menu cost. Menu cost is the cost of changing prices. And as in the picture show, these are how inflation helped change the price of a cup of coffee over time. And here I have another example, is Miss Maddie. She'd probably be mad after this, so I should go through it quickly. She's trying to advertise the change in price of her product. Obviously, with the poster, And the cost of making the poster and spend time to advertise it is what known as the menu cost. So technically, menu cost is the cost of manufacturing the new menu, because it's a word that take from restaurant menus, because they're changing price a lot. So there's need to make up for the cost of advertising of the making poster menu. And it's obviously due to cost of inflation, because the change of price in the product is inevitable. Decision as a price of raw material increase and due to inflation. The changes can be daily, monthly, or yearly, depending on the pace of the inflation. And 30.2D, relative price variability and mislocation resources. And relative price variability is how the market allocated resource depending on the relative price. And if you want to know what relative price is, you can see it in the picture below. For example, the price of chips is $1.5, and his hourly wages is $3 per hour. So technically, the ratio of the chip to his wages is 1 to 2. So technically, he spent 0.5 hour of his working to buy a packet of chip, which is not how you manage your money. Okay, and here's another example from Mr. Boyloy Steve. I took it from his Facebook page, and his name is actually that. So he rides a motorbike to work every day, and it usually costs him $1 per liter. And his hourly wage is $5 per hour. Damn, I should get that job too. So due to a sudden shortage in gasoline, the price changed to 1.25 liter. Changing the ratio of the hourly wage to the cost of gasoline to 5.1 to 4.1. Due to the change, he might to reconsider to allocate his money, which is his resources, to riding public transportation to make up for the sudden change of price in gasoline temporarily. By doing so, he managed to save money while he waits for things to return to normal. As you can see, the relative price is changing. So in order for the consumer to catch up with the price changes, they need to learn to compare and contrast the relative price, and they have to manage their resources according to how it changes. Yeah, I know it's messy, I know it's hard, I have the same problem, and if you have questions, save it for the end, because I might have just the right answer for you. And now, moving on to our next speaker. Thank you. Bye bye.
So hi there. Now it is my turn. I'm Mouy Ing, and today I will be responsible for a few more costs of inflation, which also mark the end of our presentation as well. So hang in there. Also, we will play some Kahoot game at the end of the session to keep you guys awake as well. Now, back to our part, I remember that we used to cover this point before with Group 2. However, Group 2 was mainly focused on Frank's book. Therefore, we will rather mainly focus on Mankiv's today, plus adding new study cases and examples to further understand it more clearly. Now, continuing from our last speaker, the next cause of inflation is known as inflation-induced tax distortions. Well, there are a lot of complicated terms in this one sentence, right? So I have prepared a simple term for this. So it means that inflation could cause the purpose of tax to change and result in a various negative ways. Now let's look at this one study case and keep in mind with these questions. So does inflation encourage or discourage people from saving? Okay, assume that you bought 2 shares from Apple company in 2010, and which each share equals $100. So it added up to $200, right? And 5 years later, in 2015, you sold your share for $500. For now, let's find the capital gain together. For the capital gains, it's equal to $500 minus $200, and then we have $300 as our gain, right? And my question is, are we really gaining a worth of $300? Our instinct would automatically say yes and really be happy for the gain. However, let's give this a moment and think about the gap times that between the time that we bought the share and also the time that we sold the share. Now, what do you think would happen between 2010 and 2015? Well, in terms of economic problems, one would consider the presence of inflation, right? Yep, that's right. With the presence of inflation, do you still think our capital gain is $300 still? The answer is no. Well, during the 5 years period, the inflation could either increase or decrease. And the more it increases, the less value of money we will get. The $200 share that you bought has increased its overall price level to $400 in 2015. Now, instead of $300 values like before, our real gain is now only $100. And you may ask why. Well, because there are two problems lying in this, mostly in the tax code. Well, first off, the government can actually tax us when it comes to buying capital gains like stocks, bonds, investments, and real estate, and so on. And one more thing is that economists seem to ignore the effect of inflation when it comes to this type of income. And as a result, it increases the tax burden on the saver and making them wanting to save less. Okay, another example that also made people want to save less called the tax treatment of interest income. Well, in the simple terms, it means that when the government tax our deposit money on nominal interest is a real interest rate plus the inflation rates. And the after-tax real return, which is the money you gain back, tend to grow smaller and smaller in amount of following the increase of the inflation. Now let's take a look at this one example. Okay, assume that you put your money in the bank and say the bank give you 6% on your interest rate per year. And the government is going to tax the nominal interest rate on that 6% of your overall money. Now think of the inflation again. Inflation could either be rising or falling from one year to another, right? And what if inflations keep getting higher? Will that also affect our 6% interest rate? Okay, so the answer is yes. With the presence of inflation or high inflations, our real interest rate could get lower than 6%, and resulting in us receiving less and less amount of money, which is also known as the after-tax real return. So these two study cases can conclude that inflation could induce tax distortions and also discourage people from saving. Right. Okay, now moving on to the next cause of inflation, which is the inconvenience and confusions. Meaning that inflation could cause inconvenience and confusion to the inexperienced investors. Well, because inflation affects the function of money as a unit of measurement. In a simple way, it means that if the real value of money changes, it becomes increasingly difficult for people to measure and to compare the monetary values. Whenever there is more money in the system, it is going to cause the price to rise, and that decreases the value of money, which is 1 over P. And if you try to account for firms and profits, then balancing could really become very difficult. At the same time, if you are a consumer or a producer and you cannot understand or differentiate the yardstick of money that is constantly moving, well, as a result, it's going to make your daily transaction and budgeting become even more confusing. Now, our last confusion is known as redistribution of wealth. It simply means that one may obtain more wealth than he or she expected. So I used to think that inflation made everyone worse off because it's generally simple to think that the presence of high inflations tend to benefit no one, but rather depress one economy as a whole. However, my perspective changes. Inflation does not destroy wealth, plus inflation either benefits the borrowers or the lender, but still it is a negative effect anyway. Okay, now we'll take a look at our last study case, which is in a real life animation stuff. I don't know, it's drawing. Okay, so let's see here. Also, excuse my drawing. Okay, let's see here. We have Sawan, and the bank is called Nana Bank. And Sawan went to Nana Bank to lend some money to buy something for his boyfriend Seav Fong. Okay, normally when lending money from the bank, there is a contracted form, right? And principally, it includes the interest rate, one of the most important things in the contracted form. But before knowing the interest rate to charge Sawan, the first thing that the bank will do is to predict the inflation rate. For that, for example, they expected inflation to be 3% by next year. So now they decided to charge Sawan for 6% interest rates. However, there is an unexpected inflation tomorrow, which the actual inflation turned out to be 7%. Then the real interest rate is lower for the bank. They are not receiving much from Sawan. It means that the inflation rate turned out to be unexpected, and it is higher than the interest rate. So if we can see that if the inflation is higher than expected, then the bank loses and the borrowers wins, meaning that more money will go to the borrower and less money for the bank. But if the inflation is lower than expected, then the bank wins and the borrower tend to lose, meaning the redistribution of wealth is going to the bank, and then someone has to pay more money for the bank. Alright, so that's it for my part. I guess our presentation is done, and thank you for your attention.